The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Now, I was never any good at math, but I can figure this out. Right after John Harbaugh got fired as coach of the Ravens yesterday, his agent said he immediately heard from 7 teams. Well, at the moment, there are 7 openings, including the Baltimore Ravens. So at least one team that has not yet fired its coach, I assume, has expressed some interest in John Harbaugh. Don't think it would happen here, but you can't rule anything out in what is a wacky period for the NFL, as it is every year, but maybe this year is just a little bit wackier than other years. So we'll try and sort through all of this, plus what happened in Ashburn yesterday with the firing of Kliff Kingsbury, and no surprise, Joe Witt Jr. They also fired Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach. That was somewhat of a surprise because I thought the offensive line played pretty well this year. But obviously they've got some issues with that, so they move on. And these are Dan Quinn decisions, according to Adam Peters. Peters said this the other day, that all the coaching decisions are left up to Dan Quinn, even though there had been reports that there was friction between Peters himself and Kliff Kingsbury, who was shown the door. We'll get to that and what all that means and who might be coming here and the names that are being thrown around, including Brian Daboll, who was fired as coach of the Giants. But I don't know if Tony's doing a show today, which we run, I guess, in the afternoon now, that he often talks about this, the fear and terror that he has when you have a late-breaking story and they have to go live at the beginning of PTI. They tape the show on a regular basis. I think they start at 4 o'clock and they're done by 5. And then they kind of babysit the show. And if nothing breaks before, say, 5:25 or so, they just run what they've got. But this, I guess, broke early enough that they had to go live. So as this was just a few minutes from being reported on ESPN, like on their news show that they do between 5 and 5:30, at 5:30, Tony Kornheiser, Mike Wilbon come on with the breaking news that, in fact, after 18 years, the Ravens have fired John Harbaugh.
The team finished 8-9 on the season. But during his 18 seasons as head coach of the team, Harbaugh's record was 180 and 113. Wow. And 13-11 in the playoffs, including a Super Bowl win in 2013. Wilbon, what do you make of this?
Tony, it's certainly after that big game on Sunday night between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, Harbaugh and Tomlin, it seemed like one of them was just destined to go. Like people had talked it into the universe and somebody had to go. And now here is Harbaugh going. Here's what I do make of it, even though it's still somewhat surprising. Given that Harbaugh, to me, those numbers and the Super Bowl make him a Hall of Fame coach to me. 18th all-time in wins, Tony. So Baltimore only, though, has 3 playoff wins with Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson in his 7+ seasons. 3 playoff wins. In the meantime, Mahomes, I'm going to the other extreme here with Andy Reid, has 17. Even Josh Allen, in his 8 seasons, has 7 playoff wins in Buffalo. So I'm looking at Harbaugh and his offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, who the last 2 years just looked foolish too many times. And they wasted not only Lamar when he was healthy, but they waste Derrick Henry, a Hall of Fame running back, 2 years. 2 years, a long time in today's sports landscape.
I think Harbaugh is 12th all-time in wins.
12th, my bad. Okay.
This is, you've been after Monken for a long time.
Yes, I have.
And I understand the criticism. Their defense has fallen off a lot more than their offense. So what you do is you fire the defensive coordinator and you fire the offensive coordinator, but you save the coach of 18 years who has won a Super Bowl before either of those coordinators got there. You say you're somewhat surprised. I'm stunned by this. I mean, Steve Bisciotti is not a quick trigger guy.
No, he's not.
This is 18 seasons. And to me, Lamar Jackson, you talk about Lamar Jackson is a great quarterback, but not in the playoffs. That is the explicable part of their record in the playoffs compared to these other people. Patrick Mahomes is the best player on the planet. I don't think you can compare anybody quite to him. I'm stunned by this. I get the thing about him playing against Tomlin. I get the drumbeat about maybe one will be gone or both will be gone or none will be gone. I would have chosen none will be gone.
Yeah.
None. So I look at this and I'm really taken aback. But I'll say this, if John Harbaugh wants to work again, he can have an open job in 30 seconds. 30 sequends, Mike. He has everything to recommend him.
But Tony, you mentioned Bisciotti. Harbaugh worked for the word solid doesn't do it justice. He, in some ways, an exemplary organization all those years. I ain't going to some of these other places that have openings right now just because they have openings. Then he'd find out how difficult it really could be.
If he wants it. But after 18 years, to think that you got fired because your kicker missed a 44-yard field goal, that's hard for me.
Tell your OC to hand the ball to Derrick Henry a little more often, and you might have won those games. That is,
you know, as they say on the other shows, that's overreaction Tuesday to me.
And that is instant reaction on PTI because that story had broken just a few minutes before they went on the air and talked about it. So their reaction was, I think, what most people felt when they heard, oh, wow, 18 years, and why did this wait until Tuesday? The kick happened on Sunday night. If they were going to fire him, why didn't they fire him right after the game or the day after? Why did they wait for 2 days? There's a lot of differing opinions on why this happened, and I'll give you three of them from three different insiders. Diana Russini of The Athletic, who is very, very well connected. She's on the phone with front office people and coaches all the time. Her reporting says that the sticking point on this, believe it or not, and I'm with Wilbon, that you got to give the ball to Derrick Henry more. According to Diana Russini, Harbaugh did not entertain any conversations about potentially moving on from offensive coordinator Todd Monken, and that idea emerged, she says, as a pressure point. So why was he so loyal to an offensive coordinator? He's been through a bunch of them in 18 years. I don't know. But that, according to Diana Russini, is the reason for it. I'm more prone to believe, and I have no inside information, but it just seems to me that this makes the most sense. This is Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network talking to colleague Judy Batista about why this happened.
My understanding, after talking to several sources involved, is that simply Harbaugh lost the locker room. But at the end, players just simply had doubts about whether or not they wanted to play for him as their head coach. The opinions of players, Judy, was valued here. It was listened to. It went to all levels, and it's not just Lamar Jackson. Now, it sounded like to me, with Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson not being on the same page, and it continued throughout the locker room, maybe not 100%, but more than enough for the Baltimore Ravens to say among the reasons to move on, this was a big one.
Okay, so maybe that played in as well. So it's Monken, and it's the, and that's a cliche. Who knows how deep that went? He lost the locker room. What exactly does that mean? I'm sure of the 53 men on the roster, some of them were very loyal to John Harbaugh and like what he did, and he's in demand. There are reports that the Giants are very interested in hiring him, as are a number of other teams. So I don't know what exactly lost the locker room means, but that's what Ian Rappaport is reporting. Adam Schefter of ESPN is not aligned with Rappaport on this.
I think after 18 years, people feel like maybe it's time to try something new. And I don't think it's a Lamar Jackson issue. I'm sure perhaps it contributed to it. I think it was a little bit unusual for Lamar Jackson not to come out and at least endorse his coach the other night, but I don't believe that's what drove this in the end. I think there were a number of factors. I think it was a lot of different things after 18 years, and they came so close to getting over the hump in each of the last 3 years. We had Zay Flowers drop the ball at the goal line. against the Chiefs in the conference or the AFC Championship game. We had Mark Andrews drop on the 2-point conversion last year. We had Tyler Loop's missed field goal. And sometimes you feel like you're knocking on the door and you're not getting in, and it's time to make a change.
Well, it's kind of football. Some things happen your way that are very fortunate, and they swing back the other way. And like Joe Flacco throwing a touchdown bomb to beat the Broncos in the playoffs and take the team to the Super Bowl. If that play doesn't happen, there's no Super Bowl, and who knows if John Harbaugh lasts for 18 years. So Harbaugh's a candidate now. And you would have to believe that Kliff Kingsbury is at least going to draw some interest, maybe up the road. He might be a possibility with the Lamar Jackson situation. But it is puzzling that rather than let him leave on his own, they decided that they were going to get him out yesterday. Now, they called it agreed to part ways. Look, if this was mutual, we would have heard from Kliff Kingsbury by now. We have not. So this was clearly a firing. And it comes on the heels of them cleaning out their lockers on Monday with Jaden Daniels saying this about Kliff Kingsbury.
I mean, I love working with Kliff. Me and him have a special relationship. We kind of built that over his past 2 years. I kind of just wish I was out there more to play for him this past year. So, I mean, that's kind of the focus for me in this offseason is just rebuilding myself from the ground up and, hopefully go out there, and that's the most important thing to be available for my team.
That's what Jaden Daniels said on Monday. On Sunday, his mother put out on Twitter, headed in the right direction. This is after they beat Philadelphia and, of course, he didn't play. Headed in the right direction. Let's go. Officially loading JD5, your son, Jaden Daniels 5, and KK Kliff Kingsbury season 3. So mom is endorsing a year 3 for Kliff Kingsbury, and Jaden Daniels is at least saying publicly, yeah, bring him back. I love playing for him. But the real tell was the news conference that happened in that evening with Dan Quinn and Adam Peters together, and Quinn being asked specifically about his evaluation of Kliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, we're going through all the coaches, Kliff offensively, defensively, on the teams wide. And so that's really what we're digging into, Nikki, to find what's best, how do we do it, where do we find spaces to improve. And, for Kliff, for Joe, for Larry, for all of us, that's our main focus, so we're never in this space again. And that's what we want to dig in hard on.
Kliff and Joe are gone. Larry, being Larry Izzo, is still on the job, but he did fire the offensive line coach, Bobby Johnson. So there's change in Ashburn, and there almost always is when you have a season like this. But the real question is, what are they looking for now in offensive coordinator? Who is going to come in and run the system that they think is going to take best advantage of what is a franchise quarterback? I mean, that's the big key here. It's Jaden Daniels and how you utilize him, more importantly, how you keep him healthy. And Barry's Beluga's got a column about that today. He says it's not a stretch to believe that Quinn and to some extent Peters believed that Daniels would be served best by a different offense, one in which the quarterback was under center more frequently, one that's more in line with what Quinn ran with Kyle Shanahan, his offensive coordinator in Atlanta. It's also not a stretch to believe that Kingsbury, an NFL head coach once already, a coordinator with credentials who could get a job elsewhere, wouldn't compromise on his beliefs. Absolutely. I think that's 100% so. He mentioned the tweet that Regina Jackson, Daniel's mother, put out on Sunday, and he goes on to say that Quinn said the quarterback is involved in the process. Very much so. It will be a part of it, but I would say not only will he, like we already are going on here, so it's really important that we know what he brings to us, what he means to us. I think it's an all-encompassing, all-in on how we play the game. So that's indicating that Jaden may have had some say in this, that they may have consulted him on this. I'll tell you something. If Jaden was not consulted on the firing of Kliff Kingsbury, I'm 100% in favor of that. That's how the old regime used to work. The tail used to wag the dog. If the coaching staff and the general manager feel that the Kliff Kingsbury offense is not the best thing long-term for Jaden Daniels, keeping him upright, continuing his development, then he has to go no matter how Jaden feels about that, because that's the way it's supposed to work on a team, that you do have a chain of command. Players play, coaches coach, GMs decide who's on the roster, or at least who's available for the coach to keep on the roster. And so if Kliff Kingsbury, who is right to say, no, I'm dancing with the one that brung me. This is what got me to be a head coach. This is what got me to be a successful offensive coordinator. Everybody loved me last year. Everything worked out great, and we had a bad year. Okay, but I'm not going to change everything just to suit what you want to do here. So that makes total sense. And so now, as they look for somebody to come in here, and who knows who it's going to be. But it's going to be somebody with big credentials. I'll tell you why, because that's the attractive part of being an offensive coordinator here. You not only have a guy who's got great skill, but has demonstrated it. When Kliff Kingsbury became the offensive coordinator here, he probably had a good idea they were going to draft Jayden Daniels, but who knew how good he was going to be in year one? Now that at least he's proven it, sure, it was a disastrous year injury-wise this year, but what we saw in year one is he's got a set of skills that is hard to match, and that will probably attract a very good offensive coordinator who will look at this as, and I don't think you can get a guy who's going to stay here for 10 years. I just don't think it works that way. I think you want to get a guy who wants to be a head coach again and will have a chance to raise his profile and raise his credentials by being a coordinator with Jayden Daniels. I think that's totally in the mix here. As Barry concludes his column today, he says, any candidate for the job installing and calling his plays not only must understand that he must arrive with a plan equipped to balance the danger Daniels can inflict on a defense without exposing the quarterback to too much danger himself. And that is going to be tough to find because you got two things going against you here. One, the build of Jayden Daniels, and two, his game, the part of the game that has made him great, the part of the game where the defenses are frozen, whether he's going to hand off, whether he's going to throw, or if he's going to take it himself. And if he's going to take it himself, that's when they have to lay back a little bit. So it's a tough needle to thread, I guess. But also, it is a very attractive situation because you're going to a team that does appear to have a quarterback. Now, if you don't believe in the long-term future of Jayden Daniels, and if you don't believe no matter what offense you run, you can keep him healthy, then you don't want to come here. But I think they're going to get somebody like a Brian Daboll, somebody of that level, somebody who's been a head coach like Kingsbury had been in the past to come here and kind of gear himself up for another run. All right, coming up, we will get to this crazy thought, but as you talk it out more and more, maybe it's not so crazy. Curt Cignetti going from Indiana to the Raiders with his Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Let's play the speculation game. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
It's an expression that I don't hear as much anymore, overnight success. That used to be a big term, overnight success. And if you really, look at Curt Cignetti, you would be tempted to use that term, but he's 64 years old. He was hired as head coach at Indiana when he was 62, and he was hired with a big yawn. Like, okay, yeah, fine. Indiana football, nobody cares. Nobody goes to the games. It's a basketball school. And what are his previous stops? Indiana University of Pennsylvania, ooey pooey. Oh, is it Elon? Yeah, okay, he did very well at James Madison. He, by the way, isn't the first coach to have done well. They're not quite that well, but it's James Madison. Where's he been? Oh, he worked for Nick Saban. But yeah, that was a while ago. A lot of people work for Nick Saban. Not all of them become successful. So 2 years ago today, which would have been, January 7th of 2024, he was the head coach at Indiana. And most people went, okay, yeah, let's see. Maybe he can build something up. Maybe they can make a bowl game once in a while. Like when John Thompson was hired as coach at Georgetown, the school president said to him, it'd be nice if we made the NIT once in a while. So, and I've told this story a bunch of times, but I remember this when I think it was like 8 or 9 straight years that they had been to the NCAA tournament and went to the Final Four of championship game 3 straight years with Patrick Ewing, winning the national title in '84. Finally, 1993, they don't make the tournament and they play the NIT. and they're hosting a game at McDonough against Texas El Paso, which is really a cool thing because, John Thompson, trailblazer, first African-American coach to coach in the Final Four, win a national championship against Don Haskins, who was still there at UTEP. And they had been Texas Western win in 1966 with an all-black starting five. They beat an all-white Kentucky team, and they made a movie about that and all that stuff. So the history there was cool. But Thompson was in his office, and he was saying, when I got hired, the school president said it'd be nice if we made the NIT once in a while. He says, I'm happy to accommodate this year. And so you've got this guy, Curt Cignetti, who's, okay, people at James Madison knew who he was, and they were angry that he left before the bowl game. But he comes in, and he's saying, that not only does Purdue suck, but Michigan sucks and Ohio State sucks. And 2 years later, he's better than all of them and may win the national championship. But he's 64. He's not really an overnight success. But the success at Indiana is overnight. And it's ramped up so quickly that with possibly 2 games to go and 2 more wins to win the national championship, maybe the most improbable football national championship that has ever happened in the entire 126 or 27-year history of college football. No, more than that, because college football started before the pros. So 155, whatever it is, it's a long, long time. The most improbable story. And before he's even had a chance to compete for the national championship, they have to win on Friday night in Atlanta against Oregon to have a shot at the winner against of Miami and Ole Miss. That it's already begun that he could become the head coach of the Raiders and take his Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Fernando Mendoza with him, since they have the number 1 pick. It's reached the talk show stage. It's not just the Twitter rumor, Twitter speculation. This is Tony and Mike last night on PTI with this report that's out there from CBS.
Intriguing piece of speculation from CBS Sports. Brad Crawford, their writer, wonders if Curt Cignetti might be interested in the open Las Vegas Raiders job. The Raiders have the first pick in the upcoming draft. Many boards have Cignetti's Heisman winning quarterback at IU, Fernando Mendoza, as the overall number 1. Cignetti could take that job and bring Mendoza with him. Tony, could you see a Raiders-Cignetti partnership actually working?
This is a really cool story. There are lots of intriguing aspects to it, and to me, one of those intriguing aspects is the history of Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti moves. He does not grow roots in a certain place. He moves around. He was an assistant under Nick Saban at Alabama. Then he took the head coaching job at IUPUI. Then the head coaching job at Elon. Then the head coaching job at James Madison, and now the head coaching job at Indiana. And each step along the way, he took that job and moved up the ladder. Mike, to me, the coaching ladder ends with the NFL. It doesn't end with Indiana.
No doubt.
And I think that Curt Cignetti, his deepest belief is in himself, not the zip code that he's living in for however long he is living in it. And if he believes in Mendoza,
right?
If he truly believes in Mendoza, and he takes this job and he takes Mendoza, he has solved the toughest problem in football, which is the relationship between a head coach and a star quarterback. This is why at least I thought the Giants should have interviewed Lane Kiffin, because he coached Jackson Dart. Why we both think the Browns ought to talk to Dabo Sweeney, because maybe he can do something with Deshaun Watson. Look at what Sean Payton has done with Bo Nix. Look at what Liam Cohen has done with Trevor Lawrence. So that to me is the intrigue in taking the job.
Tony, the only but I'm going to have is a big one. You and I have talked about the Raiders over the last couple of days, sometimes off camera, sometimes on. They're broken.
Yeah.
They're broken. The whole infrastructure is broken. It's not, 37-year-old Al Davis who is running the Raiders anymore. And the Raiders don't have so many things that to go out and use your resource to draft that quarterback, to take Mendoza, who we both think looks very, very capable at this point. Tony, to bring him in when you have so many other places that need to be fixed first, it seems real dicey, real risky. And I don't know that Cignetti, as good a coach as he is on the college level, can fix what's broken with the Raiders at the pro level.
Cignetti, right, he's got to want this and want that guy, and he's got to understand that the owner, Mark Davis, fires coaches all the time. After they got rid of John Gruden, he went through Bisaccia, he went through McDaniels, went through Antonio Pierce, and he just went through Pete Carroll, and none of them even got 2 years.
Yeah.
So you can fire coaches, but you never fire the owner. That's the problem. That's why I would not take this job.
If, in fact, it's something he even considers. That's Tony and Mike on PTI yesterday about this report that the Raiders would be interested in hiring Curt Cignetti and having him draft his quarterback who won the Heisman Trophy, Fernando Mendoza. I just get inside the head if I can. I mean, not that I know him in any way, but he's approximately my age. He's just a few years younger. And, he has reached the point that he wanted to reach when he left Alabama and was willing, so this thing about money, it's more than money to go to the NFL. But I think if he comes up short, especially if he doesn't win the national championship, I think that eliminates all possibilities of that. If he wins the national championship, there's also let's see if we can repeat. Let's see if we can do that in an era where rosters turn over every year. But he's killing it in the transfer portal right now. And so, does he want to go? And I think that's also a very good point that Tony and Mike make about the organization. If you're going to make your entry into the NFL, and again, he's almost like Steve Spurrier, except he's a decade older. Remember when Steve Spurrier came here, he had actually had more pro coaching experience than Cignetti has. Steve Spurrier had coached in the USFL with the Tampa Bay Bandits and actually done pretty well. Didn't embarrass himself. He comes here, which was, at that time, just a mess of an organization, being run by Dan Snyder and Vinny Serrato, and it didn't work out, partly because of his cockamamie ideas, that he could resurrect his Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, Danny Werfel, who didn't have a pro arm, and win with him, and Shane Matthews, same thing. No, I mean, it didn't work. But also, it's the same thing. He had not been an NFL coach before. And Spurrier also had played in the NFL for over a decade, mostly a backup with the 49ers, and then was the starting quarterback on the first team to go 0-14, which was the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I just don't see it, but you never know. You never know what can happen, and somebody is going to be at least trying to get Cignetti, and it may be the Raiders. Now, here's a view that's Tony and Mike, columnists, very successful TV show. Mike Tannenbaum, former executive, ran the Jets, ran the Dolphins. He's on Dan Patrick yesterday saying, don't rule out Tannenbaum going to the Raiders.
Who says no? When you go back over the last 40 years, and nobody knows this better than you do in North American sports, and you think about the transformational coaching jobs, we could talk about Mike Krzyzewski leaving West Point and creating Duke basketball. You could talk about Jim Calhoun going from Northeastern to UConn men's basketball. You could talk about Gino Auriemma and women's basketball. But when you think about where they've been for over 100 years and what he's done in 2 years, I say this a lot, the data is overwhelming that college coaches fail, but what in Curt Cignetti's background would lead you to believe that he wouldn't be successful?
I always look at style. That style works in college. Does it work, with pro players? So that would be the first thing I would say.
Dan, you're a former professional baseball player. You gravitated to coaches who made you better, that would ultimately make you more money. And there's a lot of different styles that work in the NFL across the board. And if Curt Cignetti walked into that building with the credibility he has, and he's won at Indiana University in Pennsylvania, he's won at James Madison, he won at Indiana where no one's ever won before. If I'm a player, this man may be able to put more money in my pocket. I'm going to give him a chance.
This is a guy who would know. He's worked in the NFL, worked in front offices, and he's taking this seriously. Crazy. And, unlike a college job where you have the portal and all that stuff, the NFL year really doesn't start until the combine. So you've got almost 2 months now, right? You still got to go through all the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and I think the combine's early March. So, yeah, I mean, he could win the national championship on the 19th. That's only 12 days away, and be introduced as head coach of the Raiders on the 20th. It could happen. Should it happen? No. Will it happen? Who knows? Who knows? One other interesting thing from Tannenbaum yesterday, and I'd not heard this before. He was talking about Jackson Dart. Dan was asking him about the openings in the NFL, and this is before John Harbaugh came down, the John Harbaugh firing what were the best jobs, and he was talking about the Giants' job being a good job because you have a quarterback in Jackson Dart, but you also have a quarterback who it's questionable will be able to stay on the field with the way he plays. And in discussing that, listen to the nugget that Tannenbaum drops about when he was working for the Jets.
He has to learn how to take better care of himself. Now, I lived that, ironically, in New York. We brought in Joe Girardi, who at the time was the manager of the Yankees, to work with Mark Sanchez on a protection plan, learn how to slide, learn how to shift your body weight. So I think that's a skill you can learn. And one of the things I would tell all these young quarterbacks, Cam Ward, Jaden Daniels, Jackson Dart, part of the evaluation process of you being a great player is a protection plan you need to have, because your availability is part and parcel in the value you bring to this team.
You needed somebody to teach Mark Sanchez how to slide.
Rex Ryan brought in Girardi, and it actually was an incredible afternoon because it really, I think, helped Mark become a better – he protected himself better after we met with Girardi. It's a skill, Dan. Look, you're a baseball player. You would know it better than most football coaches, but obviously the nuances of when to go out of bounds, obviously there was that big hit in the New England game. Like, he'll learn from that, but it is a skill to understand how you protect yourself. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, those guys knew when to throw it away. They knew when to go down. Like, they played for a long time. And Jackson Dart, it's a skill that he could get better at, but that's something he has to work at.
Yeah, but he has to understand that, that his mindset, he can know how to slide, Mike, but he has to want to slide. That's the biggest problem I see with Jackson Dart.
Well, the head coach has to make it part of your job description. If you want to play football here, if you want to be our starting quarterback, you will slide. If you take unnecessary and reckless hits, either you're going to get benched or you're going to get hurt. So either one of them is going to make you not on the field. So let's come up with a plan where you could be aggressive. There's times to dive. There's times to go head first, third down, end zone, fourth down. But there's also times where you got to lift a fight another down. And typically that comes with experience, maturity. I think he'll get there.
I had not heard that before about Joe Girardi, who was then managing the Yankees, about coming in to teach sliding to Mark Sanchez. It almost sounds like a sports radio caller, somebody calling up WFAN. Yeah, hey, Mike, you know what they ought to do with the Jets is they ought to bring in Joe Girardi to teach him how to slide. And then, like Francesa might hang up on the guy. But that actually happened. That actually happened, that Mark Sanchez got sliding coaching from the manager of the New York Yankees. Now, I do remember this when it was pretty clear that RG3 didn't know how to slide, and RG3 had not been a baseball player. He was a track athlete. That's where his speed came from. He, I think, could have been an Olympic hurdler. He won the Big Ten or whatever it was, the Big 12 championship with Baylor in the hurdles as a freshman there, and then transitioned, of course, to football. Probably a track would have been a better thing for him. Very self-centered guy, would have done better in something like that. But that was the discussion. Yeah, well, how do you teach him to slide? I think Ryan Zimmerman volunteered to do it, and it was met with sort of a chuckle, like, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, bring in a baseball player to teach him how to slide. They actually took that step. I'd never heard that before. That's really cool. Did it turn Mark Sanchez into a really good quarterback? No. He's best remembered for the butt fumble, and now, sadly, facing some pretty serious charges for a parking lot incident when he was intoxicated and lost his job with Fox and all that. But wow, that's a cool one. That it really is. And think of Joe Girardi getting a call in his office like that. Yeah. You know who I would have called? The person I would have called, maybe they did and he wasn't interested. The person I would have called for sliding advice with a quarterback was Kirk Gibson. Kirk Gibson was, as you know, a great baseball player with the Dodgers. You may not know that he was good enough to play wide receiver in the NFL and probably would have been taken in the first few rounds of the draft. He was a great wide receiver at Michigan State. And wound up, choosing to play baseball, which, turned out pretty well for him. But that's the guy I would call. Somebody who has experience with both. And I guess I don't know if Girardi had any football experience, but that's one of the really cool hidden nugget stories that I had not heard. This has been talked about, and it's not something necessarily. It's the way these the salary cap works in the NBA and these ridiculous salaries that they pay. It's all about how much of this money that you can offload. So you've got Trae Young, who seems to be a diminishing asset at the age of 27 years old. And you got C.J. McCollum, who had 27 points last night in the Wizards' victory, and has a contract that is paying him $30 million this year. And then you got Trae Young, who's making $46 million this year and a player option based on the way he's playing. You better believe he'd take that option. $49 million next year, so it's over $90 million in money that's owed to him. But the way things work and the way you can make deadline deals and so forth, this apparently would make some sense for the Wizards to get him. Now, in terms of the player that they would be getting, Reggie Miller, who was on yesterday with Dan Patrick, is on NBC's coverage of basketball of the NBA. Great player for the Indiana Pacers for all those years. He's saying that buyer beware on Trae Young.
Here's the problem, and sometimes it's getting success too early. You mentioned it. I think his decline really started after the Hawks went to the conference finals and lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, the eventual champions. And I think things came too easy for him. And again, I'm not in their practices. I don't follow them day to day, but I hear things. And when you hear things that players don't like playing with him, he doesn't practice hard. He doesn't come early and work out. He certainly doesn't stay late and work on his game. When I hear comments like that, I hope they're not true, because I think he is an unbelievable talent and he can help a team out. The problem is he's small. He's not going to grow. He's not very big. He's slight. So he gets taken advantage of at the defensive end. And if you're not going to work on your game, if you're not going to bulk up, look at Stephen Curry. I mean, they were almost the same size at one point. And you look at Curry now, how much he has bulked up, continues to work on his shot like it's going out of business. I don't know if Trae works like that. I don't know if he's committed to working like that. So if you're the Hawks, you have a decision to make. What can you get in return for him? And the longer they wait, those kind of returns start to go down. It's like the stock market. So, but I know we've seen him on display in New York. We know he's a ice Trae. We know what he can deliver. Is what can you get for him? And going forward, how is Trae going to act wherever he goes?
Yeah, and we've seen this before. You constantly have to improve yourself when you get to the NBA. And what you're hearing from Reggie Miller, and he's not just spouting off. He's in arenas a couple times, 3 times a week. He's talking to various people. He's got people that he knows, and he's telling you this guy is not working at it. And when they don't work at it, that sometimes leads to the end. I'll tell you a guy who had a resurgence, though. Boy, what a resurgence out of jail. Michael Vick. What you're hearing from Reggie Miller about Trae Young was a lot of what you heard about Michael Vick, and he later admitted to being that guy with the Atlanta Falcons. He just had so much physical talent that he was able to overcome a lot of that. But then it started to decline a little bit, and then he realized he had to get his act together, which he did in Philadelphia under Andy Reid, and had a couple of great years, and famously had that wild game where he hung 59 on the Redskins in, 2011? They had given Donovan McNabb a phony baloney contract extension earlier in the day, figuring that would fire all the fans up for this big Monday night game, and then Michael Vick just totally lit them up. So I think, and really the reality of what the Wizards are trying to do, yes, they do need a point guard and one that could score like Trae Young, but I don't think that's a long-term solution to what they're trying to do here. This is all building through the draft, and it's a contract that they would also have to unload some more money besides the C.J. McCollum $30 million contract. So I don't know where that's going to go, but it is interesting speculation. All right, coming up, more on the coaching go-round as things unfold there. And Bill Cowher with an analysis of what we're likely to see in the playoffs. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Round and round we go. It's an annual rite of early January in the NFL. Where are these coaches going to land? The ones that got fired, will they get new jobs as head coaches or be coordinators? And who's going to take their places? All kinds of fun speculation that we do. Bill Cowher, who is one of only 3 coaches that the Steelers have had since 1969, was on Rich Eisen yesterday and has some thoughts on how it's done in a really good organization, not like the Raiders and other teams who fire coaches all the time. And 33 years ago, not 33, excuse me, 54 years ago today, the Los Angeles Lakers made it 33 straight. 33 straight wins, which is something that's hard to get your head around, especially in the NBA. And with load management these days, that'll never happen again. But bad teams beat good teams more often than before. The Lakers were on a mission in that 71-72 season, and they won their one championship with Jerry West. Jerry West, one of the all-time greats, lost so many times to the Boston Celtics in the finals that he refused to go back to Boston after he finished playing. Even when he was the great general manager of the Lakers, he would stay behind when the team went to Boston because he wasn't going to set foot in that city. So we'll get to what happened in that incredible 71-72 season a little bit later on in the hour. Just a couple follow-ups. Talked a lot about the firing of John Harbaugh in the first hour. Who might be in line to take his place. Don't rule out Kliff Kingsbury, who was fired yesterday as the offensive coordinator in Washington. Kind of a surprise, although, you go back to the news conferences that happened on Monday, and Dan Quinn with every opportunity to say, well, we're building something here with Jaden, and we'd like to keep the continuity of Kliff Kingsbury. And that's, a lot of successful quarterbacks have had the same coordinator for a long time. Peyton Manning, I think, had Tom Moore for his entire run when he was in Indianapolis. That helps. When you're changing offensive coordinators all the time, that's tough. But it could be that they're looking for somebody who will, be more in line to keep them upright. And Barry Zerluga actually wrote a column about that today, and he said, even though Adam Peters said at the news conference on Monday that it's up to Dan Quinn to pick the assistants, he says it's not a stretch to believe that Quinn and to some extent Peters believe that Daniels would be best served by a different offense in which the quarterback was under center more frequently, one more in line with what Quinn ran when Kyle Shanahan was his offensive coordinator in Atlanta. And it's not a stretch to believe that Kingsbury, an NFL head coach once already, a coordinator with credentials who could get a job elsewhere, wouldn't compromise. So that reporting by Diana Rossini, which was debunked by some, but she had reported last week that there was friction between Adam Peters and Kliff Kingsbury. And somebody, why would that be the case? A general manager and an assistant coach don't usually mix. Well, it could have been that Dan Quinn said, yeah, I kind of agree with that. And he might have had Kingsbury talk to Peters. And, they're talking about players that they want to have. Remember, it was Kingsbury who put the note on Adam Peters' desk that he wanted him to draft Josh Connolly out of Oregon with the number 1 pick. Taking a tackle in the first round is not a common thing unless you believe he's very important. Say they had signed Laramie Tunsil or traded for Laramie Tunsil in the offseason, so they had their established left tackle, and they're taking a right tackle who they think can be there for some time. So Kingsbury was interested in protecting Daniels, but as Tom Lavero writes in his column today, he would have liked to have seen more questions, more time. It was a 35-minute news conference that they had on Monday with both Peters and Quinn. He would have liked to have seen more time with Adam Peters and more questions that would have been asked about the way things unfolded this season. And he points out, why wasn't he there when the trading deadline came and passed without making a move? More importantly, he never surfaced throughout the whole Jaden Daniels injury fiasco. Now, Tom does admit he's writing the column from a bar stool in Cocoa Beach, but He said if he would have been at the news conference, he would have wanted to know a couple of things. What did Peters think about the coach's decision to keep Daniels already sidelined with 2 injuries during the season in a game midway through the fourth quarter of a 38-7 blowout loss? They lost 38-14 to Seattle when Daniels suffered a dislocated left elbow. Or the confusion that followed about Daniels' status after he returned 4 weeks later for a game against Minnesota, only to re-aggravate it and leave the game, and then hear from Quinn that he could have returned and then was finally shut down for the season a few days later. Did Peters have a conversation with Quinn about Daniels being in the Seattle game in that season? Quinn later said he made a mistake by having his quarterback in the game at that point. Did that result from a conversation with Peters? Was Peters involved in the decision to shut Daniels down for the season? Where the conversations about Daniels were the conversations with him about owner Josh Harris? Was he involved in the decision to shut Daniels down? Okay. Those are all legitimate questions. Tom, I don't think would have the opportunity to ask all of them because the format is each reporter gets to ask 2. But, yeah, he might have asked a couple of them. And so, what do we know as the season ends about how these things were handled? And I think most importantly, he points out at the end of the column that Josh Harris bought an organization that was handled a lot like the current administration in D.C., that there were real credibility issues. There was a lot of lying that went on especially during the Bruce Allen days. And he says showing a full commitment to answer for your failures would be a small step in the right direction. Okay, all legitimate points, but they now have moved on from Kliff Kingsbury and and these 2 hires. Whether Dan Quinn has not committed to hiring a defensive coordinator. Joe Witt was his buddy. He brought him with him from Dallas. Witt had been the secondary coach when Quinn was the defensive coordinator. Clearly didn't work out. Wasn't a good, even with the great season that they had in 2024, defense wasn't good. I didn't think he was a good defensive coordinator. And this year it bottomed out and they had to take his play calling duties away. So no surprise he got fired. That's one to keep an eye on. I think it'd be smart to hire a defensive coordinator, but he hasn't committed to doing that. And then the offensive coordinator, that could really be the key move for whether he keeps his job or not after next year. It's pretty amazing that 2 years after this magical season that he could be on the line. He will be on the line. He's got to have a season where they're at least competitive. That you can't have a 5-win season. You can't have 2 5-win seasons that survive. That he will be gone after next year if he has another year like this, and he knows it. And so he's got to hit this right. He's got to thread the needle. Got to get the right offensive coordinator here. And as Barry Zerluga points out, and others, you got to have somebody who's going to get the best out of Jaden Daniels, but also keep him healthy. And that's going to be a big part of what. And also. The way this unfolded with the big vote of confidence that you got from Jaden Daniels' mom on Sunday, and believe me, she has a big influence on his career, and not in a negative way, but she's very, very much a part of everything he does. And then Jaden Daniels saying publicly that he loves playing for Kliff and just wishes he would have been out on the field for him more. So this could have happened without them consulting Jaden Daniels, which I have no problem with. That's the way a business should work. Chain of command. You don't have the players deciding who's going to be the coaches. You have the front office and the ownership deciding who's going to coach the team, and the coaches coach the players. So if it worked that way, that's the way it's supposed to work, a functional way. Meantime, you got the crazy situation at Michigan, which blew up right before the new year. That you now have a new coach who's actually an old coach, Kyle Whittingham, who's 66 years old, and he's coming in from Utah, where he'd been, I think, for like 13 years, and he's taking over a program that is just, they won the national championship a couple of years ago. They didn't win it last year, and, well, I guess they won in 23. They didn't win it in 24, and then this year they had a season that wasn't horrible, but then what happened with the coach was Sharon Moore was crazy. And so now Kyle Whittingham walking in from Utah, where you're not as under the microscope as you are in Ann Arbor. It's a different deal. Yeah, they want to win in Utah, but the national focus is much more on you at Michigan. And a late stage of life where he's essentially retired. He had moved from coaching to work with what is now really the front office of Utah football. And now all of a sudden he's the head coach at Michigan, and talked to Dan Patrick yesterday about the challenge.
The place doesn't need a rebuild. It needs a reboot of trust and get rid of the drama and just get back to playing Michigan football without all the distractions. The one thing is it didn't come from the players. The players were not involved. It wasn't some player, issue. It was just the peripheral. And so guys here have a great attitude. I met with every single one of them at the Bull site last week. Just quality young men, care about academics, excited to be at Michigan, but they've dealt with a lot over the last few years. And so that's where they're at.
What did you need to hear?
I needed to hear that they were having a good experience here, exclusive of the distractions.
The athletic director and the higher ups. What did you need to hear from them?
Well, I need to hear that Michigan was what I thought it was, top 5 program, which I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's a special place. They're committed to winning here. We do have some challenges with entrance requirements. There is a little bit of a hurdle there, but you talk about athletes, resources, tradition. It's all here at Michigan.
You haven't been out of Utah or Idaho, I don't think.
You're right.
Right?
Not as a coach. You're right.
Yeah. So what do you need to learn about, being in Michigan and the Big Ten and hating Ohio State? Now you got to deal with Indiana and.
Yeah, well, we transfer or moving leagues is nothing new to me or where I was at. We went from the WAC to the Mountain West to the Pac-12 to the Big 12, and I was there through it all, and so know exactly how to navigate that. We've had a pretty good track record against Big Ten schools while I was at Utah. In fact, against Michigan, we were 3-0. So that didn't hurt my cause during the process, the hiring process. But football is football, Dan, and it's X's and O's. They don't change. Certainly the level of competition is increased, but it's relative. I mean, we have good players here, so it's I think it's a good situation.
Do you hate Ohio State?
Don't I have to? Yeah, I think I have to. But
isn't there a seminar that there? And I know Urban was helping you, wasn't he?
Absolutely. I've been close with Urban ever since we worked together back in 2002 and 2003, and I was his defensive coordinator. I was on the staff. Staff got let go. Urban got the job. I was the only holdover, and really developed a great relationship with him and have maintained it ever since. And he absolutely helped me along the way here.
Isn't that sleeping with the enemy, right? Urban Meyer, Ohio State guy, Ohio guy, helping Michigan out. Okay, well, Kyle Whittingham has been a very good coach. And probably the right guy to bring in to just listening to him talk. It's a soothing voice that he has. Seems like the right guy to step into what has been a very volatile situation. So that makes sense. But he's also a guy who's most of his career has not dealt with the NIL and the craziness that's in college football these days. And the latest is this. University of Washington quarterback DeMond Williams Jr. had recently announced that he had signed, and this is how things work, their annual signings, Malik Washington did this at Maryland, had signed a contract to return to the team for next season. Yeah, he's coming off a sophomore year where he was very effective, completed nearly 70% of his passes for over 3,000 yards and 25 touchdowns, also rushed for 611 yards and 6 TDs, all Big Ten honorable mention. Great year. And with more eligibility, why wouldn't you want him back? And he signs a contract to do that. Well, guess what? Just days after signing that contract to come back for another year at Washington after having a great season, he has entered the transfer portal. And in writing about his move to enter the transfer portal, he said, "I have to do what is best for me and my future." What? Why would anybody trust you now? You signed a contract. Now, I'm sure the lawyers are all looking into this and seeing, what they can do about it. I don't know if they can. But that is rich. Hey, I got a new contract. I'm coming back. Don't worry, everybody. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going in the transfer portal because I have to do what is best for me and my future. So Whittingham, who's seen it all over a long, probably been coaching 40 years plus, Kyle Whittingham is looking at the system now and saying, nope, this is not going to sustain.
2 to 4 or 5 year window here, you're going to see a major overhaul of Division I football. I think it's going to become more of a minor league NFL model. I think you're going to see a salary cap, collective bargaining, players as employees. I think that all that's coming because you're exactly right. We can't maintain this pace. It's impossible.
Can we have a commissioner?
Yes, I would love one. I think that's in the cards as well.
But is everybody going to listen? Is the SEC going to listen, or the Big Ten? I mean,
they have to. And if we get ultimately align with the super conferences and get things commissioned, have a commissioner that runs it all and put some teeth into it, I think that's the only way to survive. And you're already seeing private equity starting to enter the equation.
I know.
It's crazy.
Where are we going with the playoffs? It's probably going to 16 next year, but where are we going?
Well, to 16, first of all. And I kind of agree with Coach Dan Lanning at Oregon. It would be nice to have the season wrapped up by January 1st, especially the way the portal window is right now. I mean, it's chaos. And so I think there needs to be revamping not only of the system itself, but at least immediately the calendar. The calendar needs to be tweaked.
What kind of money are we talking about? What's a top-end quarterback costing now in the portal?
Well, I heard today that one university in the state of Texas is paying $5 million for a starting quarterback for this year. And so I think that might be that's the most I've heard of. And I know some basketball players are making more than that from what you hear. But a starting quarterback now, apparently the price is $5 million.
$5 million for a guy who, and let's look at his options here, because we're just talking about what happened at the University of Washington, where the quarterback signs a contract and then enters the transfer portal saying he's got to do what's best for his family. Look at the options now for a quarterback. Let's say, I forget the guy's name, but he's talking about the quarterback who went to Texas Tech. And if you watched in the playoff, they need a quarterback. But a quarterback going to Texas Tech for $5 million. This is an available option now. You can play 4 games. If he doesn't like the way things are going at Texas Tech, he can take a redshirt year. He could just say, I'm out. I'm not playing anymore this year, and I'm transferring. And there's nothing to stop him. And I don't know, I guess they'd fight it out over the $5 million. I don't know whether you get that in advance or weekly installments, but that's there too. That's how the game is played. That's why it's complete chaos now. Whittingham is 100% right. It's nuts. So for $5 million, you may have bought yourself somebody who's going to check out, or, injuries do happen in football, and they happen to quarterbacks no matter how much you protect them. A guy could tear his ACL in the second game. Too bad. $5 million. Got to go with your backup. How much is your backup making? Oh, he's only making $200,000. Well, he's going to want to renegotiate. He's going to say, well, you've got a team here that can make the playoffs, and you're paying me $200,000. I'm going to need $1 million to stay. And if you don't want to do that, well, I'm going to take my redshirt year too, and I'm going to leave. Yeah, it's just nuts. Just crazy. But I will say this. Games are good. Enjoy watching the games. We don't really care. It's just how the sausage is made. Sausage tastes really good. How it's made, I don't know if you want to see that anymore. And it's not sustainable the way it's made, because this just can't work long term. They have to. Even Jay Billis, who is very much in favor of athletes getting paid and was front and center on this years and years ago, says, yes, you have to sign athletes to contracts. And if they want to leave after a year, there's a buyout. But there's also the possibility that you may not want this guy after 2 years. You sign him to a 2-year contract, and if you don't want him, you don't re-sign him. He's got to go someplace else. That's professional sports. That's the way this has to work, because it is, professional sports. That wraps it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.